Welcome to FEMA's Public Assistance Program webinars presented by FEMA's Training and Development Branch.
Today we're going to talk about the Disaster Recovery Reform Act, Section 1206. This is Building Code and Floodplain Management Ordinance, Administration and Enforcement, FEMA Policy 204-07901. So the DRRA, Section 1206, authorizes FEMA to provide state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, SLTTs, with the resources needed to effectively administer and enforce building code and floodplain management ordinances following a presidentially declared disaster. The authorities come out of the Stafford Act, Sections 402 and 406. Section 402 of the Stafford Act allows FEMA to provide assistance to SLTTs for building code and floodplain management and enforcement, including inspections and substantial damage compliance. Section 406 of the Stafford Act allows FEMA to reimburse base and overtime wages to be able to hire additional staff to facilitate the implementation and enforcement of their adopted building codes for a period of no longer than 180 days after the declaration. Principles of this policy are to increase the overall speed of recovery by providing financial assistance to conduct activities to enforce the adopted building codes and floodplain ordinances, and to enhance compliance with the SLTT building codes and floodplain management by allowing additional resources to carry out the required activities after a disaster. The DRRA 1206 authorizes FEMA to provide resources to SLTTs to complete their building code administration, code enforcement, floodplain management regulation administration, and enforcement, and complete the substantial damage operations. You can see here some of the activities that go into each step, including building code administration to review and process building permit applications, collect fees, hire, train, supervise staff, etc. Code enforcement to inspect structures, review elevation certificates, conduct and process condemnation determinations, floodplain management regulation, administration, and enforcement. Again, can hire, train, supervise staff, provide training, process permits, and then substantial damage operations. This is where the applicants will conduct field surveys, prepare cost information, and perform inspections. Now we're going to talk about some requirements to be eligible for 1206 funding. To be eligible for public assistance funding, SLTTs must be authorized for permanent work under a major disaster declaration. They also must be in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, be legally responsible for administering and enforcing adopted building codes and floodplain management regulations, report all activities captured in a damage inventory line item within 60 days of the recovery scoping meeting, and applicant can submit that documentation through the grants portal on their side or through the PDMG, uploading it into the grants manager. So who is eligible under 1206? All SLTT governmental agencies in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program are eligible for DRRA 1206. FEMA will not fund activities if the applicant has been suspended or sanctioned from the NFIP program. View NFIP participation status within FEMA's Community Status Book under Not in Good Standing link. This is FEMA's Community Status Book, and this is public facing on FEMA.gov. Now, when you first get to this page, at the very top, it does talk about the National Flood Insurance Program. However, the Community Status Book and what we're looking for is about midway down the page here. So we're going to scroll down to where it says Find a Community Status Report right here. Okay, and what this does is it breaks things down by state. So for this example, we'll just do the state of Florida. So we can narrow it down, and there that gets everything narrowed down to the state of Florida. Now, when this first opens up, this shows all the communities that are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program. However, what we're looking for are those who are not participating. So there's a very small right underneath the very top of the heading here where it says select here for not participating. And this is actually a hyperlink that will take you to the bottom of this document, which shows those communities and those applicants which are currently not in the flood insurance program, or they're possibly been sanctioned. So right here, the state of Florida, Bay Lake, looks like Lake Buena Vista. We're looking at the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, it used to be Reedy Creek. These are not participating in the National Flood Insurance Program applicants. So that's where you go to look. Again, go to FEMA.gov. It's about midway down the page, and you have to go all the way to the end of the report, and there's that little hyperlink. So what type of activities are included under DRRA Section 1206? Activities to administer and enforce state and locally adopted building codes and floodplain management ordinances for a period of no longer than 180 days after the date of a major disaster declaration. Here are some examples of eligible work for substantial damage determinations. Noted here are some eligible work activities for these determinations, and it's not an all-inclusive list. For a longer list, please see policy section B for eligible work. Activities not listed in the policy will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. What are substantial damage determinations? Substantial damage, or SD, refers to any structural damage where the cost of restoring the structure to its pre-disaster condition would equal to or exceed 50% of the market value of the structure. Assistance provided through the PA program under DRRA 1206 will provide additional financial assistance to disaster impacted communities to assist local floodplain administrators in making SD determinations. Here we see eligible work for building code administration and enforcement. Noted here are some eligible work activities for building code administration and enforcement, but this is not an all-inclusive list. For a longer list, please see the policy section B for eligible work. Activities not listed in the policy will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Moving on to eligible work for floodplain management, administration, and enforcement. Noted here are some eligible work activities for floodplain management, administration, and enforcement, but again, it is not an all-inclusive list. For a longer list, please see the policy section B for eligible work. And again, activities not listed in the policy will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. All right, now what you see here is kind of a busy slide, but it really is about pointing out the fact that this is not just something that's done between the program delivery manager on the FEMA side and the applicant point of contact. There's a lot more people involved, including our state and local officials, to include the floodplain administrator. This is the person that is responsible for administering and enforcing the NFIP's floodplain management requirements and has the jurisdiction and authority over the floodplain management in that area. Also, we want to talk to the building officials for that area as well, whether it's the officer or somebody else that's been given the authority to do that type of work, administration and enforcement of communities' building codes, or a different representative that has that authority. Other people to consider are our state recovery partners, the applicant's emergency manager, the county executive officer or the mayor, or you can talk to the budget or finance office. Also, Gold Nugget can be found in the tax assessor's office, to also include the state national flood insurance program coordinator's office. Now, on the FEMA side of the house, it's not just the PDMG, like I said, it's also our field disaster staff and leadership, but also regional building science points of contact and coordination specialists, and also to include the FEMA floodplain management and insurance branch staff.
When does the clock start for reimbursement to be eligible? DRRA Section 1206 can begin the first day of the incident period. However, Section 1206 specifically defines a period of no longer than 180 days after the date of a major disaster declaration. FEMA does not have the authority to support activities occurring more than 180 days after the date of the major disaster declaration. Remember, no time extensions can or will be granted. The following examples will demonstrate the 180-day timeline. In example number 1, the incident date is August 26, 2021. The declaration was signed on September 7, 2021. Adding 180 days beyond the declaration date means no activities occurring after March the 6th of 2022 will be eligible. Example 2 indicates an incident date of May 17, 2021, and a declaration date of August 20th, 2021. Adding 180 days beyond the declaration date means no activities occurring after February the 16th of 2022 will be eligible. So the applicant can start the work as soon as possible after the incident. However, they can only claim costs up to the 180th day after the declaration. Based on the examples, example 1 will allow the applicant a total of 192 days, whereas example 2 would allow the applicant 275 days to capture all eligible work. Remember, FEMA does not have the authority to grant any time extensions. What DRRA 1206 is and what it is not. It does allow administrative costs to inspect, enforce, and disseminate code enforcement information. It does provide PA funding for administrative costs related to project management and design activities. This includes expenses incurred to inspect, enforce, and disseminate code enforcement information. This is not a Category Z management cost project. Category Z projects capture costs to manage and administer the public assistance awards. This is also not for one specific facility or project. It is to inspect and enforce codes jurisdiction-wide, which include public, private, and residential facilities. This means the facilities do not have to be eligible for public assistance funding to be inspected. Code enforcement is for public safety jurisdiction-wide. How and when to discuss 1206 with applicants. Start on the exploratory call, or EC, to discuss eligible activities. As always, the exploratory call is to get an overview of damages and to explain to the applicant what will be needed for the recovery scoping meeting. Clarify that this is new funding source for code enforcement and floodplain management. Explain how inspections for all buildings and floodplain activities are limited to the 180-day deadline, which was previously explained. This will be discussed more in depth at the RSM. Please assure that the applicant has the appropriate individuals to discuss code enforcement and floodplain management at the RSM. Include this in the discussion of the Program Delivery Plan, or PDP, which is the follow-up meeting in Grants Manager. Remember, make sure everyone is cognizant of the deadline date. What do 1206 projects look like? They are unlike any other project for public assistance. They are very different. 1206 projects are a hybrid of emergency work and permanent work, which follow emergency work rules. This means for force account labor, only the overtime labor is eligible. All associated costs can be on one damage inventory line item. If there are multiple DIs, then the applicant must provide the cost breakdown for labor, contract, etc. And DIs can also be broken up by activities. Please do your best if using multiple DIs that you utilize logical grouping. This will make validation and documentation much easier for you, the applicant, and the CRC. How are 1206 projects developed? 1206 projects are developed as a permanent work project at the 75% federal cost share or the permanent work cost share for the event. Please make sure you know the current federal cost share for your event before presenting this to the applicant. Currently, they are developed as Category G projects in Grants Manager, and all costs are captured in one single Cat G project per applicant. When the Papa G version 5 is officially published, projects will be classified as the new Category I projects. You will utilize simplified procedures on small projects and full documentation and actuals on large projects. Remember, The costs captured in the 1206 projects are not the same eligible costs that are obtained for the Category Z management cost projects, which have a 100% cost share. The 1206 eligible costs are for code enforcement and floodplain management.
Okay, now we will discuss documentation requirements. Small projects will use the simplified procedures policy. Project scopes and costs will be developed from applicant-provided cost summaries and estimates of the work activities. And then the project will be certified by the applicant using the Small Permanent Work Project Certification and Acknowledgements form, very similar to the old AppCert forms. Large projects are still based on actuals and all documents are required. The applicant must submit all supporting documentation necessary to demonstrate that the work is completed and the location of the work. If the work was performed by contract vendors, documentation is needed demonstrating federal procurement rules found in 2 CFR Part 200, and all documentation associated with work completed through EMAC resource request or interstate or interlocal mutual aid request. FEMA may also require applicants provide documentation demonstrating that eligible activities are in support of the community's legally adopted building code or floodplain management ordinances. This may include floodplain management ordinance administration and enforcement documentation, disaster-related development inspections, and substantial damage inspections. Now we're going to look at a real-life example of a project out of Arkansas found in the Grants Manager. And this is what the DDDs look like. You have the typical information for the damage there at the top, including the location, GPS, and what caused the damage. But highlighted down at the bottom, you will see the facility damage is very high level. In this one, it says they are developing substantial damage determinations assessments on 25 each of the private properties and private buildings to verify compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. This is what the scope of work looks like in the Grants Manager. What we normally see with projects, we do see that the applicant utilized force count labor and contracts for those structure inspections for the city of Jacksonville, citywide, for all their buildings, and to enforce floodplain management activities and ordinances. So you see there, right out of the policy, city of Jacksonville with their own force count labor had 4 laborers for 72.5 hours for $3,300. And then they also got some contract folks to help them out to do some tornado damages in those surveys for 25 private properties at $1,400. The work completed totals has the breakdown of force count labor and contracts for a work completed total of $4,700. Also, down to the bottom, you'll see in the project notes that there are some important things listed there as well, including inspections are to enforce floodplain management ordinances, and right now are eligible on Category G projects per PDMG position assist and is covered under the DRRA Section 1206 policy. In the future, this will be Category I under PAPA G version 5. And then number 2, in accordance with FEMA's 422 simplified procedures, the project scope and costs were developed from applicant-provided cost summaries and estimates and then certified using the Small Permanent Work Project Certification Acknowledgement forms. The next few slides will address DRRA 1206 uses, eligibility, and questions and answers. The first question says, do activities to inspect the disaster-related damages need to be publicly owned buildings to be eligible for PA reimbursement? The answer is no. Work eligible under this policy is available for public, private, commercial, and private residences. Second question asks, my community has been suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program. Is my community still eligible to receive this type of assistance? And the answer is no. If a community has been suspended from NFIP or sanctioned for not participating in NFIP, they are not eligible for DRRA 1206 PA project reimbursement. The next question reads, when should the applicant start capturing these types of activities after a disaster? Well, the answer is that the applicant should start the first day of the incident and no longer than 180 days after the declaration date of a presidentially declared disaster with permanent work Category C through G. The applicant should capture activities such as, but not limited to, administering and enforcing state and locally adopted building codes and floodplain management ordinances, For additional activities, please refer to the FEMA policy. Again, please discuss this policy and these activities at the exploratory call and more so at the recovery scoping meeting. Next question asks, are there specific requirements to the type of building structures for which eligible work will qualify under DRRA Section 1206 resources? So the answer is, unlike other types of assistance that PA provides under Section 406 of the Stafford Act, the DRRA Section 1206 eligible work may include costs to administer and enforce building codes related to the entire community's building stock. This can include public, private, and residential structures. That also includes commercial structures. The costs associated with administering and enforcing building codes and floodplain management regulations, regardless of whether the facility is eligible for PA-funded repairs or replacements, are eligible for DRRA Section 1206 resources as long as the facility was damaged by the disaster event. It has to be a declared disaster. Next question reads, are DRRA 1206 resources available for counties with emergency work declaration only, categories A's and B's? The answer is no. Communities with only emergency work authorization under sections 403 and 407 of the Stafford Act are not eligible for 1206 resources. FEMA is authorized to provide funding for code administration and enforcement under section 406 of the Stafford Act. Therefore, a major declaration must be included for the assistance under section 406 to receive assistance for permanent work categories C through G. Question asks, what happens if there's a lag time between the date of the major disaster declaration and the date in which a declaration is amended to authorize PA permanent work? Public assistance can reimburse costs for eligible work done starting on the first day of the incident period and up to 180 days following the major disaster declaration is amended to authorize the PA permanent work. Again, refer to section C of the eligible costs in the 1206 policy. Can an applicant use this funding to update or adopt new building codes? The answer is no. Although updating building codes to reflect current data is critical to safety, outdated building codes are not a direct result of the disaster and therefore not eligible for funding through the PA program. This is done through consensus-based codes, specifications, and standards, also known as CBCSS, DRRA 1235B. However, other federal funding sources may be available through FEMA. Interested applicants should contact their respective FEMA regional office or state NFIP coordinator for information about alternative federal resources to update or adopt new building codes. Here is a listing of the DRRA 1206 policy resources. For any additional information regarding the 1206 policy, and if you have any additional questions, please contact the FEMA regional office or the state NFIP coordination office.
Now we have some closing information for you. To report corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and/or misconduct, contact the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Inspector General by phone at 1-800-323-8603 or via the mailing address listed on the screen now. Procurement requirements are among the most complicated parts of the PA grant process, and noncompliance can result in de-obligation of funding. Please make sure that you are following FEMA's procurement guidance for recipients and subrecipients. Federal requirements for procurement and contracting are described in 2 CFR Part 200. The Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, or PDAT, offers some training and tools on their website at www.fema.gov/grants/procurement. For technical assistance with Grants Portal or Grants Manager, you can call the PA Grants Portal Grants Manager hotline at 866-337-8448. National hours of operation are 8 a.m. through 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. The hotline can also be reached by email at FEMA-recovery FEMA-PA-grants at fema.dhs.gov. We have many other recorded webinars and tutorial videos available on our YouTube channel. You can find them by searching for FEMA Grants Portal on YouTube or by navigating to the Support Center in Grants Portal or Grants Manager. Thank you for watching.